This is our daughter." The words sliced through the silence of the mansion like a sharp blade. Wesley Kroeger, the billionaire CEO known for his ruthless coldness in business, felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He looked from the woman in the worn yellow hoodie standing at his door to the little girl with blue eyes identical to his own. Eyes he saw in the mirror every day for 33 years. Eyes that now stared back at him from the face of a 5-year-old child he never knew existed. 6 years. It had been 6 years since that stormy night when a delivery woman appeared at his door, drenched by rain, her motorcycle broken down. One night when two lonely hearts found each other in the darkness. One night he tried to forget, buried under mountains of work and the pain of losing his wife Bethany. But Leona Matlock hadn't forgotten. She couldn't forget, not when she carried within her the result of that encounter, not when she gave birth alone in a hospital, not when she worked 3 jobs to give Alice everything she could, living in a tiny apartment, skipping meals so her daughter could eat. And now she stood there pale and visibly sick with dark circles under her eyes, holding their daughter's hand with a strength that spoke of desperation. "I tried to find you," her voice broke. "I tried to tell you, but you were unreachable and I was scared. Scared you wouldn't believe me. Scared you'd try to take her from me. Scared you simply wouldn't care." Wesley opened his mouth, but no sound came out. How do you respond when you discover you're a father? How do you react when years of your life have been stolen? And the most terrifying question of all, why was Leona here now, after all this time? The answer came like a punch to the gut. "I'm dying, Wesley. Cancer. And Alice has no one else but you." Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Cherry Creek mansion, casting long shadows across the empty hardwood floors. Wesley Kroeger sat motionless in his leather chair, a cup of coffee growing cold on the mahogany desk before him. At 33 years old, he had everything the world said a man should want. His company, Kroeger Industries, had just closed a deal worth hundreds of millions. His face had graced the cover of Forbes magazine twice in the past year. He lived in a mansion that could house 20 families comfortably. Yet as he stared at the spreadsheets on his computer screen, the numbers blurred together into meaningless figures, and all he could feel was the crushing weight of emptiness. It was Friday afternoon, nearly 4 o'clock. Jennifer Blake, his loyal assistant of 6 years, had practically pushed him out of the office 2 hours ago. "Go home, Wesley," she had said, her voice carrying that mixture of concern and exasperation that had become so familiar. "You haven't taken a day off in 3 months. The company won't collapse if you rest for a weekend." He had gone, more to stop her worried looks than out of any desire for rest. What would he do with rest? What would he do with time that wasn't filled with meetings, contracts, and projections? Wesley pushed back from his desk, the chair wheels rolling smoothly across the polished floor. The sound echoed in the vast silence of the house. 6 years. It had been 6 years since Bethany's car had skidded on black ice on I-25. 6 years since the phone call that shattered his world into pieces he never quite managed to put back together. They had been married for only 2 years, but she had been his everything. His light, his laughter, his dreams of a family, of children running through these empty hallways, of birthday parties and scraped knees and bedtime stories. After she died, Wesley had done what he knew how to do. He worked. He built his company into an empire, pouring every ounce of grief and rage and desperate energy into making Kroeger Industries into something that mattered, something that would last. But empires didn't keep you warm at night. Success didn't hold your hand when the nightmares came. Money couldn't fill the void in your chest where your heart used to be. He wandered through the mansion now, his footsteps echoing off marble and hardwood. The house was immaculate. A cleaning service came 3 times a week to maintain what no one lived in, polishing surfaces no one touched, arranging furniture no one sat on. Wesley passed the room that was supposed to be a nursery. He hadn't opened that door in years. Bethany had picked out the paint color, a soft butter yellow that would work for either a boy or a girl, They had been planning to start trying after their 3rd anniversary. Wesley made it to the living room and sank onto the leather sofa, the same sofa where he had sat with Bethany 1,000 times, where they had watched movies and talked about their future. He picked up his phone, scrolled through his contacts. Who would he call? Who was there to call? His parents had retired to Florida. His college friends had drifted away, unable to penetrate the wall he had built around himself. He had colleagues, business partners, people who smiled at him at charity galas and shook his hand at board meetings, but no one who really knew him. No one who cared if he was sitting alone in this empty house on a Friday afternoon, drowning in memories. The doorbell rang. Wesley looked up, confused. He wasn't expecting anyone. Packages were always left at the gate. Jennifer knew better than to send anyone unannounced. For a moment he considered ignoring it, but some impulse he couldn't name made him stand. His heart was beating faster as he crossed the foyer. He couldn't have said why. Perhaps it was simply that anyone, was better than sitting alone with his thoughts. When Wesley opened the door, the world tilted on its axis. Standing on his doorstep was a woman with long blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a faded yellow hoodie and jeans. Her face was thinner than he remembered, pale with exhaustion, but her eyes were the same. Those soft brown eyes that had looked at him with such understanding on a rainy night 6 years ago. Leona. Her name surfaced from the depths of his memory like a message in a bottle, something he thought he had lost to the ocean of time. Leona Matlock, the delivery woman who had appeared at his door during a thunderstorm, whose motorcycle had broken down, whom he had invited inside out of basic human decency, and who had somehow, in the space of a few hours, made him feel alive again for the first time since Bethany's death. But it wasn't just Leona standing there. Beside her, small hand clasped tightly in her mother's, was a little girl. A little girl with blonde hair styled in 2 pigtails, wearing a red dress with white polka dots. A little girl whose eyes, when she lifted them to meet his, were the exact shade of blue as his own. The same unusual depth, the same way they seemed to catch the light. Wesley had looked at those eyes in the mirror every morning for 33 years. He knew every fleck of color, every subtle gradation. And now he was looking at them in a stranger's face, in his daughter's face. "Wesley," Leona said, and her voice trembled. She looked terrified. "We need to talk." Wesley couldn't speak. His throat had closed. His heart was hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. He looked from Leona to the little girl and back again. The girl was staring up at him with curious, intelligent eyes. She couldn't be more than 5 years old. 5 years old. The math was brutally simple. "Please," Leona whispered. "I know I have no right to show up like this, but please, let us in." Wesley stepped back, moving like a man in a dream. They entered and he closed the door behind them, sealing them all inside this moment that would change everything. The little girl looked around the foyer with wide eyes, taking in the high ceilings and the chandelier and the sweeping staircase. "Wow," she breathed. "Mommy, this house is like a palace." "Alice," Leona said softly. "Remember what we talked about. Manners." Alice. Her name was Alice. Wesley's daughter. His daughter. The words kept repeating in his mind but wouldn't connect to reality. He led them into the living room, his body moving on autopilot while his brain struggled to process what was happening. Leona sat on the edge of the sofa, perched like she might bolt at any moment. Alice stood close to her mother, one small hand holding tight to Leona's. "I'm sorry," Leona started, but Wesley held up a hand. "Just tell me," he said, and his voice came out rough. "Tell me everything." Leona took a shaky breath. Her hands were trembling in her lap. "Do you remember that night, 6 years ago? The storm?" Wesley nodded. He remembered. God, how he remembered. He had tried not to think about it, had buried it under work and grief and guilt. But he remembered the way she had stood in his doorway, drenched and shivering. The way they had talked for hours, Two lonely people finding unexpected connection. The way her eyes had held his, and how they had come together like two drowning people reaching for each other in the dark. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks later, Leona continued, and now tears were spilling down her cheeks. I tried to find you, Wesley, I swear I tried. I came back here, but your security wouldn't let me through the gate. I called your company over and over, but I could never get past the receptionist. They said you didn't take personal calls. They said I needed to schedule an appointment through your assistant, and when I tried, they wanted to know what it was regarding. And I couldn't say it over the phone to a stranger. Wesley closed his eyes. He had made himself unreachable. After Bethany died, he had built walls so high that no one could scale them. He had instructed Jennifer to screen everything, to keep his personal life separate, to protect him from anything that might hurt. And in doing so, he had shut out the one person who had needed to reach him. Then I saw you on the news, Leona said, her voice breaking. At some charity gala, in your tuxedo, surrounded by all those important people. And I looked at myself. I was 22 years old, working 3 jobs, living in a studio apartment in Capitol Hill. I looked at you in your world and I thought, what right do I have to come into that? What if you thought I was just after your money? What if you tried to take my baby away? What if you didn't want her at all? You should have told me, Wesley said, and anger was rising now, hot and sharp. You should have found a way. That was my child, my daughter. You had no right to make that choice for me. I know, Leona cried. I know I didn't, and I've regretted it every single day. But I was scared, Wesley. I grew up in the St. Mary's orphanage. I never knew my parents. They abandoned me when I was 2 days old, left me on the steps of a church with nothing but a blanket. I grew up knowing what it feels like to be unwanted, and I couldn't risk Alice feeling that. I thought if you didn't know about her, then she would never have to know that her father didn't choose her. The little girl, Alice, had been watching this exchange with wide, frightened eyes. Now she tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mommy, she said in a small voice, why are you crying? Leona wiped her face quickly, forcing a smile. It's okay, baby. Mommy's okay. But she wasn't okay. Wesley could see that now. Really see it. Leona wasn't just thin, she was gaunt. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her skin had a grayish pallor that spoke of illness, of pain. When she had hugged Alice just now, Wesley had seen her wince as if the movement hurt. Why now? Wesley asked, and his voice was quieter. Why are you here now after all this time? Leona looked at him, and in her eyes was a fear deeper than anything he had seen before. Because I'm sick, she whispered. I have cancer, stage 3. They found it 8 months ago. I've been doing chemotherapy, radiation, everything they can throw at it. But the doctors say it's aggressive. They don't know how much time I have. And I realized, if something happens to me, Alice will have no one. She'll end up just like I did, alone in the system. And I can't let that happen, I can't. The room seemed to spin. Wesley gripped the arm of his chair. In the space of 5 minutes, he had discovered he had a daughter and that he might lose the woman who brought her into this world. He looked at Alice, really looked at her. She was beautiful. Blonde hair like her mother, but his eyes, his exact eyes. She had a small nose dusted with freckles and a serious expression that made her seem older than her years. She was still holding tight to Leona's hand, her small knuckles white with the strength of her grip. Alice, Wesley said gently. The girl turned those blue eyes on him and his heart cracked wide open. Do you know who I am? Alice nodded slowly. Mommy says you're my daddy. She showed me a picture. From the internet. You run a big company. That's right, Wesley said. He wanted to reach out, to touch her, to hold her, but he didn't want to scare her. And you're my daughter, which makes you the most important person in the world to me. But you didn't know about me until today, Alice said with the devastating logic of a child. How can I be important if you didn't even know I existed? Wesley felt like he had been punched. You're right, he said. I didn't know. And that's not your fault. It's not even your mother's fault, not really. But now I do know, and I promise you, Alice, I promise I'm never going to leave you, no matter what happens. Alice studied him for a long moment. Then she said, Mommy needs help. She tries to hide it, but I know she's sick. She cries at night when she thinks I'm asleep. And she can't work as much anymore, so we don't have as much money for food. Leona made a sound of distress. Alice, we're managing just fine. Mommy, you gave me your dinner last night because you said you weren't hungry, but I heard your stomach growling. Wesley stood abruptly. His hands were shaking, with anger at himself, at the situation, at the unfairness of it all, with determination, with a fierce, protective love for these two people he barely knew but who had just become his entire world. You're moving in, he said. Both of you. Today. Right now. Wesley, we can't, Leona started, but he cut her off. You can and you will. Look around, Leona. I have 15 bedrooms in this house. 15 empty bedrooms. I have money I don't spend, space I don't use, and more than that, I have a daughter who needs me and a... He paused, looking at Leona. Someone I should have tried harder to find. I can't change the past. I can't get back those 5 years, but I can do something about right now. Please, let me help. Leona was crying again, silently, tears streaming down her face. I don't want your charity. This isn't charity, Wesley said firmly. This is responsibility. This is what I should have been doing all along. You carried this burden alone for 5 years. You raised our daughter. You worked yourself to exhaustion. You did everything. Now let me do something. Let me be her father. Let me take care of you while you fight this thing, please. Alice was looking between them, hope beginning to dawn on her small face. Can we really stay here? She asked. In the palace? Despite everything, Wesley felt a smile tug at his lips. It's not a palace. It's just a house, but yes, you can stay. You can stay for as long as you want, forever if you'll have me. Forever is a long time, Alice said seriously. What if you get tired of us? Wesley knelt down, so he was at eye level with his daughter. This close he could see every detail. The tiny dimple in her left cheek, the way her hair curled slightly at the ends, the suspicious shine in her eyes that said she was fighting tears. She was trying to be brave. This 5-year-old child who had just had her world turned upside down was trying to be brave. I could never get tired of you, Wesley said. You're my daughter, Alice. Do you know what that means? It means you're a part of me. You're a part of my heart. And I'm going to spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that you can count on me. Alice looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly, she reached out and put her small hand in his. Her palm was tiny, her fingers delicate as bird bones. And Wesley felt something he thought had died 6 years ago flicker back to life in his chest. Hope. Okay, Alice said. We can stay. Wesley looked up at Leona. She was watching them, her face a mixture of relief and fear and something that looked almost like grief. Okay? He asked her. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Okay. The days that followed were a blur of adjustment and revelation. Wesley had Jennifer clear his schedule for the week, ignoring her shocked protests. When he told her about Alice, Jennifer had gone very still, then pulled him into a hug. Oh, Wesley, she had said. A daughter. This is wonderful, terrifying, but wonderful. She had immediately gone into efficiency mode, researching pediatricians and enrolling Alice in the best private school in Denver and ordering children's furniture online. The move itself was something Wesley would never forget. He drove to Capitol Hill with Leona giving directions from the passenger seat, Alice chattering excitedly in the back about her new room and whether she could have a princess bed. The apartment building was old, the kind with peeling paint and a broken intercom system. They climbed 3 flights of narrow stairs, and with each step, Wesley felt his heart sink lower. The apartment was a studio, barely 400 square feet. 1 room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen, a tiny bathroom with a shower stall so small Wesley wasn't sure how an adult fit inside. But it was clean, meticulously so. Leona had made it as homey as she could with what little she had. There were drawings by Alice taped to the walls, a vase of wildflowers on the small table, books stacked neatly on a shelf made from cinder blocks and wooden planks. Alice's room was a corner sectioned off by a curtain hung from the ceiling. Behind it was a twin mattress on the floor, covered with a pink comforter that had seen better days. Above the bed, Leona had painted a mural directly on the wall, a castle with turrets and flags, surrounded by flowers and butterflies. It was beautiful, clearly done with love and whatever cheap paint she could afford. Wesley stood in the middle of this tiny space and felt shame wash over him. While he had been living in his mansion, drowning in luxury he didn't appreciate, his daughter had been sleeping on a mattress on the floor. His daughter had been eating whatever her mother could afford after working multiple jobs. His daughter had been growing up in poverty while he sat on millions of dollars. "It's not much," Leona said quietly, watching his face. "But it was ours. It was safe. It was all I could give her." Wesley turned to her, and he realized there were tears on his face. "You gave her everything," he said hoarsely. "Everything that matters. I'm the one who failed. I'm the one who should have been here." They packed in silence, Wesley carefully folding Alice's few outfits, noting how many were worn thin, how many had been mended by hand. He found a photo album, cheap plastic but carefully maintained, filled with pictures of Alice, as a newborn, red and wrinkled, as a toddler taking her first steps, on her first day of kindergarten, wearing a dress that was clearly second-hand but clean and pressed. Every milestone documented, every moment preserved. "I wanted you to know her," Leona said, seeing him looking at the photos. "Even if you never saw these pictures, I wanted them to exist. Proof that she was loved, that she mattered." "She matters more than anything," Wesley said. "And so do you." Alice's clothes fit in one small suitcase, pink and battered. Her toys, precious few as they were, fit in a cardboard box. A teddy bear with one eye missing, some building blocks, crayons worn down to nubs and a coloring book half finished, a jump rope, 3 picture books from the library that were overdue. Wesley made a mental note to pay whatever fines Leona had accrued, to donate enough to the library to buy 100 new books in Alice's name. Leona's possessions were barely more. A few changes of clothes, most of them as faded and worn as the yellow hoodie she seemed to live in. Some books, their spines cracked from multiple readings. A laptop held together with duct tape that she said she used for online classes when she could afford them. A small wooden box that, when opened, revealed a few pieces of cheap jewelry and a hospital bracelet. Alice's birth bracelet, Wesley realized. The first thing his daughter had ever worn, and Leona had kept it like the treasure it was. "We traveled light," Leona had said with a weak smile, but Wesley could see the shame in her eyes, the apology for having so little to show for 5 years of life. "You traveled strong," Wesley corrected. "You survived, you both survived, and now you never have to just survive again." As they loaded the car, the neighbors came out to say goodbye. An elderly Hispanic woman who hugged Leona and gave Alice a bag of homemade cookies. A young couple who promised to keep in touch. A teenager who had apparently babysat Alice sometimes in exchange for Leona tutoring her in math. They all loved Leona and Alice. Wesley could see that. Leona had built a community here, had made a life with kindness and determination and sheer force of will, and now she was leaving it all behind to come live with him, a virtual stranger because she was dying and had no other choice. The drive back to Cherry Creek was quiet. Alice fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the excitement and emotion of the day. Leona stared out the window and Wesley wondered what she was thinking. Was she regretting this decision? Was she mourning the independence she was giving up? Was she afraid he would try to control her life, to take over? "I'm not going to try to change you," Wesley said quietly. "Either of you. I just want to help. I just want to be here." Leona turned to look at him, and in the afternoon light streaming through the windshield, she looked impossibly young and impossibly tired. "I know," she said. That's why I came. He set them up in connecting rooms on the second floor, choosing the ones with the best view of the mountains. Alice's room was large, larger than the entire apartment she had lived in before. At first she seemed overwhelmed, standing in the doorway and staring at all the empty space. "It's so big," she whispered. "Where do I sleep?" "Anywhere you want," Wesley said. "We can put your bed wherever makes you happy." By the window, in the middle, in the corner. Alice thought about this very seriously. By the window, she decided, so I can see the stars at night. Mommy and I used to look at the stars from our window. We'd make wishes. So they set up her bed by the window, and Wesley made a note to get blackout curtains for when she needed to sleep. But for now, he wanted her to have her stars. They spent the afternoon decorating, taking Alice to stores she had only ever passed on the street, furniture stores where she could test out beds and dressers, toy stores where Wesley told her she could pick out anything she wanted, and watched her face cycle through disbelief, suspicion, joy, and then overwhelming confusion at having too many choices. "I don't know what to get," she finally admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "There's too much. What if I pick wrong?" Wesley knelt down beside her, understanding flooding through him. She wasn't used to abundance. She was used to making do with whatever she could have, not choosing from unlimited options. "How about we start small?" he suggested. "Pick 3 things. 3 things that make you happy. We can always come back for more." Alice nodded, relieved to have boundaries. She chose carefully. A stuffed unicorn with a rainbow mane that she clutched to her chest immediately, a set of art supplies, a real art set with oil pastels and watercolors and thick paper, not the dollar store crayons she was used to, and a book, a thick book of fairy tales with beautiful illustrations. "Mommy used to read me fairy tales from the library," she explained. "But we always had to give them back. I want one we can keep." "We can keep all of them," Wesley promised. "We can build you a whole library if you want." Over the next few days, Alice's room transformed, the bed shaped like a castle that she had picked out. Bookshelves that Wesley assembled himself, determined to be hands-on, to be present, even if he was terrible at following instructions. Alice sat on the floor and handed him screws, chattering about everything and nothing. About her best friend Emma at her old school, about how she was scared to start at a new school, about whether Mommy would ever get better. "The doctors are doing everything they can," Wesley told her, the same thing he had told her before, the same thing he would tell her 100 more times. "And your mom is the strongest person I know. She's going to fight as hard as she can." "But what if fighting isn't enough?" Alice asked with the devastating insight of a child who had seen too much. "What if she fights and still loses?" Wesley had to pause in his assembly work, a wave of emotion nearly overwhelming him. "Then we'll be sad together," he said honestly. "And we'll remember her together. And we'll keep loving her together. But Alice, we can't give up hope. Your mom hasn't given up. We can't either." Alice nodded slowly, then reached out and put her small hand on his arm. "I'm glad you're here, Daddy Wesley, even if I just met you. I'm glad I'm not alone anymore." Wesley had to turn away so she wouldn't see him cry. He made a show of looking for the next piece of the bookshelf, blinking rapidly to clear his vision. "I'm glad too, Princess. So glad." They filled those shelves with books. Wesley took Alice to the biggest bookstore in Denver and told her to pick out whatever she wanted. She approached it with the same systematic seriousness she approached everything, walking slowly through the aisles, pulling out books and reading the back covers, carefully considering each one. She ended up with an armful, fantasy and mystery and books about animals and science. Wesley bought all of them, and then bought several more that he thought she might like, building her a library that would be all her own. Leona watched all of this from a distance, helping when she had the energy but mostly observing. Wesley could see the emotions playing across her face, relief that Alice was being cared for, joy at seeing her daughter so happy, but also grief, and what looked like guilt. One evening after Alice was asleep, Wesley found Leona sitting in the hallway outside Alice's room, just staring at the door. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside her on the plush carpet. "I couldn't give her any of this," Leona said, her voice thick. "She deserves all of it. The room, the toys, the books. She deserves so much more than I could ever provide. And now you're giving it to her in a week, things I couldn't give her in 5 years. And I feel grateful, but I also feel like I failed her, like I should have found a way." "Leona, look at me," Wesley said firmly. She turned, and her eyes were full of unshed tears. "You didn't fail her. You gave her the most important thing anyone can give a child. You gave her love. You gave her security. You made her feel wanted and valued and safe. Everything else? That's just stuff. Important stuff, yes, but still just stuff. What matters is what you've already given her, a childhood full of love. That's worth more than all the castles and toys in the world." "But she was poor because of me," Leona whispered. "She went to bed hungry sometimes because I didn't have enough money after paying rent. She wore secondhand clothes and we couldn't afford the field trips at school, and I couldn't even get her a birthday cake last year, Wesley. I made cupcakes from a box mix and we ate them by ourselves in our tiny apartment, and I sang to her while she cried because she wanted a party like the other kids." Wesley felt his heart break all over again. "When was her birthday?" "March 15th. "So we missed it this year," Wesley said. "But her next one is coming up in a few months, and we're going to throw her the biggest, best party she's ever had. We're going to invite her whole class. We'll have a real cake, one of those fancy ones with multiple layers. We'll have a bounce house or ponies or whatever she wants. We'll make it magical." "You don't have to do that," Leona said, but there was hope in her eyes. "I want to," Wesley said. "I want to give her everything I've missed. Every birthday, every holiday, every milestone. I can't get back the past 5 years, but I can make the future everything she dreams of." They sat in silence for a moment, shoulder to shoulder in the hallway. Then Leona leaned her head on his shoulder and Wesley put his arm around her. They stayed like that for a long time, two parents united in their love for the child sleeping behind the door, making silent promises to do better, be better, give her everything she deserved. Leona was harder to reach emotionally, keeping walls up that Wesley understood all too well. She was polite, grateful, but distant. She kept trying to help around the house to clean and cook, until Wesley had to physically stop her and remind her that she was supposed to be resting. She had appointments at the hospital 3 times a week for chemotherapy. Wesley insisted on driving her, on sitting with her during the long hours of treatment. The first time, Leona tried to refuse. "You don't have to do this," she said, as they stood in the foyer, her appointment card in her hand. "Jennifer can stay with Alice. I can take a lift. You have work, you have meetings." "I want to do this," Wesley said firmly, taking the car keys from the hook by the door. "The meetings can wait. The work can wait. You're more important. Please, Leona, let me." So they went together to Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center, a massive complex of buildings that Wesley had driven past 1,000 times but never entered. The oncology wing was on the 4th floor, painted in cheerful colors that seemed at odds with the seriousness of the illnesses being treated there. The waiting room was full of people in various stages of treatment, some with hair, some without, some looking relatively healthy, others frail and gray. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, sat with an older couple who were clearly her parents. An elderly man read a newspaper with shaking hands. A middle-aged woman worked on a crossword puzzle, a scarf wrapped around her head. Wesley sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to Leona's recliner, while poison dripped into her veins to kill the cancer that was trying to kill her. He watched her face go pale within the first 30 minutes, saw her try to hide her nausea, the way she swallowed hard and closed her eyes. He held the basin when she got sick, brought her ice chips when her mouth was too dry, adjusted the thin blanket when she got cold from the chemicals flooding her system. Around them, other patients went through the same ritual. The nurses moved with practiced efficiency, checking IV bags, taking vitals, offering encouraging words. One nurse, an older woman named Patricia, seemed to take a special interest in Leona. "First time bringing someone?" she asked Wesley during one of her checks. First time being here at all, Wesley admitted. It's hard, Patricia said, her voice kind. Harder sometimes for the loved ones than the patients. You feel helpless. But what you're doing, being here, holding her hand, that matters more than you know. And they talked. During those long hours, while the chemicals dripped and the minutes crawled by, Wesley and Leona talked in a way they never had before. Not the desperate, intense conversation of two lonely people seeking comfort in a storm, but the gradual, genuine conversation of two people learning to know each other. Wesley told her about his childhood in Denver, about his parents who had been loving but distant, focused on their own careers. His mother had been a surgeon, his father a corporate lawyer, both brilliant, both successful, both so consumed by their work that Wesley had often felt like an afterthought. I was raised by nannies, he admitted. Good nannies, kind ones, but still. I swore if I ever had kids I would be there. Really there. He told her about meeting Bethany in college, how she had been his first real love, his only love until now. They had met in an economics class, both reaching for the same textbook at the library. She had been studying business. He had been studying computer science. They had started talking and hadn't stopped for 4 years. She was my best friend, Wesley said. We were going to build a life together, the company, a family, everything, and then she was just gone. One phone call and my entire future disappeared. He told her about the accident, something he rarely talked about. How Bethany had been driving home from a charity event. How the roads had been icy and a truck had lost control. How she had been killed instantly, which the doctors said was a mercy, but which felt like anything but. How he had identified her body and planned her funeral and then gone home to an empty house and screamed until his voice gave out. I felt guilty, Wesley admitted one day, about 3 weeks into the treatment schedule. About that night with you. Bethany had only been gone 2 years. It felt like I was betraying her memory, like I didn't have the right to feel alive, to want someone. I tried so hard not to think about that night, but I couldn't forget it. Couldn't forget you. And then I felt guilty about not being able to forget. Leona had reached over with her free hand, the one without the IV, and taken his hand. Her fingers were cold, her grip weak, but the gesture meant everything. Wesley, Bethany would have wanted you to live. She would have wanted you to be happy. You're not betraying anyone by moving forward. I haven't been happy in a very long time, Wesley said quietly, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. Not until 3 weeks ago. Not until a little girl showed up at my door and called me Daddy. Not until I realized I had a second chance at the life I thought I'd lost. Leona told him about her own life, stories that made Wesley's heart ache. About growing up in the St. Mary's Orphanage, a large brick building on the east side of Denver that housed dozens of children. About the foster homes she had cycled through, none of them lasting. Some were fine, just people doing a job. Others were neglectful or worse. She had learned early not to get attached, not to hope for permanency. I aged out at 18, Leona said during one session, staring at the IV in her arm rather than at Wesley. They gave me a garbage bag with my belongings and $300 and wished me luck. I had my GED but no real skills. I bounced between jobs for a while. Waitressing, retail, whatever I could find. I saved every penny I could and enrolled in community college. I was going to get a business degree, open my own restaurant someday. She told him about working multiple jobs while going to community college, about the exhaustion that had become her constant companion, about falling asleep in class because she had worked the overnight shift at a convenience store, about eating ramen noodles for weeks at a time because it was all she could afford, about the constant fear of not making rent, of ending up on the street. And then I found out I was pregnant, Leona continued. I was terrified, Wesley. I was 22, broke, alone. I had no family, no support system. I thought about all my options, including ones I'm not proud of considering. But then I went to my first ultrasound and I heard her heartbeat, and I saw her on that grainy screen, just a tiny blob, really. But she was mine. She was a part of me, and I knew I was going to keep her. I was going to find a way. You did more than find a way, Wesley said. You created a beautiful life for her. She's happy, Leona. She's well-adjusted and kind and smart. That's all you. I dropped out of college, Leona said. I couldn't afford it and work enough to support us. So I took whatever jobs I could get that had flexible hours. Delivery driving was perfect because I could work whenever I wanted, could bring Alice with me sometimes when I couldn't afford a sitter. We made it work. It wasn't easy, but we made it. She told him about Alice's birth, how she had labored alone in a hospital room because she had no one to call, how she had held her newborn daughter and cried, equal parts terrified and in love. She saved me, Leona said, her voice breaking. I was so lost, Wesley. I had no purpose, no direction. I was just surviving day to day. And then I had her, and suddenly I had a reason to fight, a reason to be better, do better. She gave me a focus. She made me want to be the kind of person she could be proud of. She is proud of you, Wesley said firmly, and you should be proud of yourself. You survived impossible circumstances. You raised an incredible child. You did everything right. I gave her poverty, Leona argued. I gave her a childhood of struggling, of never quite having enough. I wanted so much more for her. You gave her love, Wesley countered. You gave her security in the ways that matter. Yes, there wasn't always enough money, but there was always enough love. She never doubted that you wanted her, that you would do anything for her. That's worth more than all the money in the world. The weeks fell into a rhythm. Wesley woke early, before dawn, and went for runs through the quiet streets of Cherry Creek. He had started running again, needing the physical outlet for all the emotions churning inside him. Fear for Leona, love for Alice, hope for their future, grief for all the time they had lost. He ran until his legs burned and his lungs ached and his mind quieted. Then he would come home and shower and make breakfast. He learned Alice's favorites through trial and error, pancakes with chocolate chips, but only if they were shaped like animals, scrambled eggs with cheese but only cheddar, not American. Orange juice in the purple cup, never the blue one, because the purple one was magic and made the juice taste better. Toast cut diagonally, not straight across. Small preferences that were enormously important to a 5-year-old, and Wesley learned every single one. He drove her to school every morning, a private academy that Jennifer had helped him research and enroll Alice in. The first day had been hard. Alice had clung to him, not wanting to go into the unfamiliar building. What if the kids don't like me? She had whispered. What if I don't know the answers? What if I do something wrong? Wesley had knelt down to her level, smoothing the red dress she had insisted on wearing because red was her brave color. Then you'll learn, he had told her. That's what school is for. And Alice? Anyone who doesn't like you is crazy because you're the most amazing kid in the world. Now go show them how smart and kind and wonderful you are. She had taken a deep breath, squared her small shoulders, and marched into the school building. Wesley had watched her go with his heart in his throat, and when he got back to the car, he had called Jennifer and told her to clear his morning because he couldn't possibly focus on work when his daughter was being brave. He picked her up every afternoon, waiting in the car line with all the other parents. He felt more normal in those moments than he had in years. Just another parent picking up their kid from school, chatting with the other moms and dads, listening to Alice's excited recounting of her day. She had made friends quickly. Emma from her old school wasn't there, but she had new friends. Sophia and Jackson and Mia. They played together at recess and ate lunch together and were already planning play dates. After school, there was homework. Wesley had forgotten how much he had forgotten. Long division required a YouTube refresher. Sentence structure took him back to his own elementary school days. But he sat with Alice at the kitchen table, working through each assignment, praising her when she got things right, and encouraging her when she struggled. "Daddy, you're good at math," Alice said one day, and Wesley felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with his abilities and everything to do with being called Daddy. He read to her every night before bed, voices and all, making her giggle with his silly character interpretations. And every night, when he tucked her in, she would hug him tight and say, "Good night, Daddy." Every time, his heart swelled so much he thought it might burst. But even as he fell in love with being a father, Wesley watched Leona struggle. The chemotherapy was brutal. Some days she couldn't keep anything down. Other days she was so exhausted she could barely get out of bed. Her hair started falling out in clumps, and he came home one day to find her in the bathroom, crying as she ran clippers over her head. "Let me," Wesley had said gently, taking the clippers from her shaking hands. He had finished the job, his hands steady, his heart breaking. When he was done, Leona looked at herself in the mirror, tears streaming down her face. "I look like a cancer patient," she whispered. "You look like a warrior," Wesley said. "You look like someone fighting for her life, for her daughter. And you're beautiful." Leona had turned and buried her face in his chest, sobbing. Wesley held her, one hand on her back, feeling how thin she had become, how fragile, but also feeling the strength in her, the determination. She was the strongest person he had ever met. It was during these moments, these quiet moments of crisis and comfort, that Wesley realized he was falling in love, not with a memory from 6 years ago, not with a night of passion born from loneliness and need, but with this woman, this brave, fierce, loving woman who had sacrificed everything for their daughter, who still tried to be strong even when she was falling apart, who smiled at Alice even when Wesley could see the pain in her eyes. He found himself thinking about her constantly. The way she laughed at Alice's jokes, her whole face lighting up. The way she looked in the morning, sleepy and soft in one of the bathrobes he had bought her. The way she said his name, with a warmth that hadn't been there at first, but was growing. He caught himself watching her, wanting to touch her, to hold her, to tell her everything he was feeling. But the timing was wrong. She was sick. She was vulnerable. The last thing she needed was him putting pressure on her, making her feel obligated. So Wesley kept his feelings to himself and focused on being what she needed: a friend, a co-parent, someone she could count on. Thanksgiving approached, and Wesley realized it would be their first holiday as a family. He asked Alice what she wanted to do, and she had looked at him with those serious blue eyes and said, "I want us to cook together, like a real family." So they did. Wesley, who hadn't cooked a Thanksgiving dinner in 6 years, followed recipes and YouTube tutorials. Leona, feeling better that week, helped when she could, though mostly she sat at the kitchen island and directed, amused by his attempts. Alice was in charge of setting the table, carefully arranging plates and silverware with the gravity of someone handling crown jewels. The turkey was dry and the gravy was lumpy, and the mashed potatoes were somehow both watery and full of lumps. But when they sat down together, the three of them, and held hands while Alice insisted they each say what they were thankful for, Wesley had never felt richer. "I'm thankful for my daddy," Alice said, "and for this house, and for Mommy feeling better this week." "I'm thankful for my daughter," Leona said, her voice thick with emotion, "and for second chances I didn't think I deserved." Wesley looked at both of them, these two people who had become his world. "I'm thankful for you both," he said, "for this family, for every single day I get to spend with you." They ate their imperfect dinner and laughed at Wesley's cooking and played board games after. And when Alice fell asleep on the couch between them, her head on her mother's lap, Wesley and Leona looked at each other over her sleeping form, and something passed between them, something unspoken, but understood. They were becoming something more than co-parents, something more than friends. December arrived with Denver's first heavy snow. Wesley came downstairs one Saturday morning to find Alice at the window, her nose pressed to the glass. "It's snowing," she shouted. "Really snowing. Can we build a snowman?" They bundled up in coats and scarves and gloves. Leona was having a good week, her energy higher than it had been in months. She stood on the porch and watched, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders as Wesley and Alice rolled snowballs across the lawn. They built a family of snowmen, a tall one for Wesley, a medium one for Leona, and a small one for Alice. Alice insisted on using her red scarf for the baby snowman and donated buttons from her craft box for eyes. They need to hold hands, Alice declared. So Wesley carefully positioned stick arms so that the snowmen looked like they were holding hands, just like Alice's drawings. That night, after Alice was asleep, Wesley found Leona on the couch in the living room, looking at the snowmen through the window. The moon was full and the snow glowed in its light, and the 3 snowmen stood together on the lawn like sentinels. "Thank you," Leona said softly as Wesley sat down beside her. "For what?" "For this. For everything. For giving Alice a childhood she never would have had. For making her happy. For making me feel like maybe things will be okay." Wesley turned to look at her. She was wearing a soft blue sweater he had bought her, and her headscarf was slightly askew, revealing the new growth of hair underneath. She looked tired but peaceful. Beautiful. "Leona," Wesley said, his heart pounding. "I need to tell you something." She turned to him, her brown eyes questioning. "I know the timing is terrible," Wesley continued. "I know you're fighting for your life, and the last thing you need is this kind of pressure, but I can't keep it inside anymore. These past few months, they've been the best of my life. Because of Alice, yes, but also because of you. You're incredible, Leona. You're strong and brave and kind. You're an amazing mother, and I'm falling in love with you. Maybe I've been falling since that night 6 years ago. Maybe it started the moment I opened the door and saw you standing there. But I'm in love with you, and I need you to know that. Not because I expect anything from you. Not because I'm trying to pressure you. Just because you deserve to know that someone sees you. Someone sees how extraordinary you are." Leona stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. "Wesley," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Wesley said quickly. "I just needed you to know." "I'm scared," Leona said, and now the tears were falling. "I'm terrified, because I love you too. I think I started falling for you in those long hours at the hospital, when you sat with me even though you didn't have to, when you held my hand through the worst of it, when you looked at Alice like she was the most precious thing in the world. But Wesley, I'm sick. I might not make it. I might not have much time left, and I can't ask you to sign up for that. I can't ask you to love me knowing you might lose me." Wesley reached out and cupped her face in his hands, gently wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Leona, I already lost my wife. I know what that grief feels like. And you know what I learned? That loving someone, even if you lose them, is better than never loving at all. I would rather have 1 year with you, 1 month, 1 day, than a lifetime without you. So, yes, I'm scared too. But I'm more scared of not taking this chance, of not telling you how I feel, of wasting whatever time we have." Leona let out a sob and leaned forward, and Wesley pulled her into his arms. She cried against his chest, and he held her, his own tears falling into her headscarf. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, 2 broken people finding strength in each other. When Leona finally pulled back, she looked up at him. "I want this," she said. "I want us to be together. I want us to be a real family. I'm just so scared of hurting you." "Let me worry about that," Wesley said. "Right now, let's just focus on fighting this thing together. You're not alone anymore, Leona. You don't have to carry this by yourself." She nodded, and then she kissed him. It was gentle and tentative and tasted like tears and hope. And Wesley felt something in his chest, something that had been frozen for 6 years, finally begin to thaw. Christmas was magical. Wesley went overboard, he knew, but he couldn't help himself. The house was decorated from top to bottom with lights and garlands and a massive tree in the living room. Alice helped decorate, hanging ornaments with the seriousness of an artist arranging a gallery. On Christmas morning, there were more presents than any child could possibly need. Toys and books and art supplies and a new bicycle with training wheels and a helmet with butterflies on it. Alice's face when she saw it all was worth every penny. Her eyes went wide, her mouth dropped open, and she whispered, "Is this all for me?" "This is what Christmas is supposed to look like," Wesley said. "And every year from now on, we're going to do it together." Leona had cried, overwhelmed by it all. Wesley had gotten her gifts too. Soft clothes and books she had mentioned wanting to read, and a locket with a picture of Alice inside. But the gift that made her cry the hardest was a framed photograph. Wesley had hired a professional photographer to come to the house, and the three of them had posed together. Wesley in the middle, Alice on his lap, Leona beside them with her hand on his shoulder. They were all smiling, all looking at the camera, and they looked like what they were. A family. "We're really doing this," Leona had whispered, looking at the photo. "We're really building this life together." "We are," Wesley confirmed, "and I wouldn't change a thing." But then January came, and with it disaster. Leona had been doing better. The chemotherapy seemed to be working. Her scans in December had shown the tumors shrinking. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Wesley had allowed himself to hope, to believe that maybe they would beat this thing. Then, one morning in mid-January, Leona collapsed. Wesley had been in the kitchen making breakfast when he heard the thud. He ran upstairs to find Leona on the bathroom floor, unconscious. He called 911, his hand shaking so badly he could barely dial. Alice had come running at the commotion, and Wesley had to physically stop her from seeing her mother like that. "Go to your room, sweetheart," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Mommy's sick. I'm calling for help. Just stay in your room, okay?" The ambulance arrived within minutes. Wesley rode with Leona, holding her hand while Jennifer came to stay with Alice. At the hospital, the doctors ran tests, so many tests. And then Dr. Patrick Donnelly, Leona's oncologist, came into the waiting room with a face that told Wesley everything before he said a word. "The cancer has spread," Dr. Donnelly said. "Aggressively, to her liver and lungs. The chemotherapy we've been using isn't working anymore. We need to try a different approach, more aggressive treatments. But I need to be honest with you, Mr. Kroeger. The prognosis isn't good." Wesley felt like he was drowning. "What does that mean? How much time?" "It's hard to say. Months, maybe. But we're going to fight this with everything we have." Leona was admitted to the hospital. Wesley called Jennifer and told her he wouldn't be coming home. Jennifer, bless her, understood immediately. "I'll take care of Alice," she said. "You take care of Leona." And that's what Wesley did. He moved into Leona's hospital room. The nurses brought him a cot and he slept beside her bed every night. During the day, he sat in the chair next to her, holding her hand, reading to her, just being there. Jennifer brought Alice to visit every evening after school. Wesley tried to keep the visits light, tried to stay positive for Alice's sake. But his daughter was smart. She saw through the forced smiles. "Is Mommy going to die?" Alice asked him one night after Leona had fallen asleep. Wesley had taken her into the hallway, knelt down to her level. "I don't know, sweetheart. The doctors are doing everything they can. But she might die." Alice pressed, and her blue eyes, so like his own, were filled with tears. "She might," Wesley said, because he wouldn't lie to her. "But your mother is the strongest person I know, and she's fighting so hard to stay with us. I don't want her to go." Alice sobbed. "I need my mommy." Wesley pulled her into his arms, holding her tight while she cried. "I know, baby. I know." The days blurred together. Leona started a new treatment regimen, and it was even more brutal than the first. She lost weight rapidly, her already thin frame becoming skeletal. There were days when she was too weak to sit up, when the pain was so bad that even the strongest medications couldn't touch it. Wesley watched her suffer and felt helpless, useless. But he stayed. Through it all, he stayed. He was there when she woke from nightmares. He was there when she was sick. He was there during the endless hours of treatment, the tests, the procedures. He read her favorite books to her in a quiet voice. He played her favorite music. He told her stories about Alice, about what she had done at school that day, about the drawing she had made or the A she had gotten on her spelling test. "You have to keep fighting," Wesley told her one night when she was particularly low. "Alice needs you. I need you." "I'm so tired," Leona whispered. "Wesley, I'm so tired." "I know, love, I know. But just one more day, okay? Just fight for one more day. And she did. Day after day she fought. Wesley watched her battle with an admiration that bordered on awe. She was in constant pain, constantly sick, her body ravaged by disease and treatment. But she kept fighting. For Alice, for their family, for the life they were building together. February came with a Denver blizzard. Wesley stood at the window of Leona's hospital room, watching the snow fall, and thought about the first time they met. Another storm, another moment when everything changed. He felt Leona's hand touch his back, and he turned to find her standing beside him. She was up, walking, which she hadn't been able to do in days. "You should be in bed," Wesley said, starting to guide her back. "I wanted to see the snow," Leona said. "With you." They stood together at the window, Wesley's arm around her waist, supporting her weight. The snow fell thick and fast, coating Denver in white. "I'm not giving up," Leona said quietly. "I want you to know that. I'm going to keep fighting for as long as I can." "I know you are," Wesley said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I'm going to be right here beside you." And he was, through February and into March. The new treatment was working, slowly but surely. The tumors began to shrink again. Leona started regaining strength, little by little. Dr. Donnelly was cautiously optimistic again, though he warned them that the cancer could come back, that this was far from over. But by late March, Leona was well enough to go home. Wesley brought her back to the mansion on a sunny spring afternoon. Alice had insisted on making a welcome home banner, and she stood on the front steps holding it as Wesley helped her mother out of the car. "Welcome home, Mommy," Alice shouted, and she ran down to hug Leona carefully, mindful of how fragile her mother still was. "Oh, baby," Leona said, tears streaming down her face. "It's so good to be home." That night, the three of them curled up on the couch together, Alice between her parents, and watched a movie. Wesley looked at his family, really looked at them. Leona was thin and bald, and still fighting for her life. Alice was only 5 years old but had seen more hardship than any child should, and he was a workaholic widower who had spent 6 years hiding from life. But they were together. They were a family, and they were going to make it. Spring bloomed in Denver. The tulips Leona had planted months ago came up in a riot of color. Red and yellow and pink and purple. Leona spent hours in the garden, carefully tending them. Wesley bought her more plants, helped her create a whole garden bed full of flowers. Alice played nearby, making mud pies and bug collections. One evening in April, Wesley asked Jennifer to stay with Alice. He told Leona to dress nicely, that he was taking her somewhere. She looked at him suspiciously but complied. When she came downstairs, Wesley's breath caught. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and her hair had grown back in soft curls. She looked healthy. She looked beautiful. She looked alive. Wesley drove them to a restaurant downtown, one of the nicest in Denver. They ate by candlelight and talked about everything and nothing. After dinner, Wesley drove them to a park. The evening was warm, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. He led Leona to a bench overlooking the city lights. "I need to ask you something," Wesley said, taking both her hands in his. Leona looked at him, her eyes wide. "Wesley?" He slid off the bench and knelt in front of her. From his pocket he pulled a small velvet box. "Leona Matlock, you came into my life during a storm and brought the sun back. You gave me the greatest gift I could ever ask for in Alice. You've shown me what strength looks like, what courage looks like. You've made me want to live again, to love again. I know we've only been together for a few months. I know we've been through hell. But I want to go through everything with you. The good days and the bad days, the victories and the setbacks. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to raise our daughter together and grow old together and build a life that's worthy of the love I feel for you. Leona, will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a simple platinum band with a single diamond. Leona was crying, tears streaming down her face, her hand over her mouth. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, Wesley. Yes. Wesley slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. She kissed him, and he kissed her back. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Everything was right. They were married in June, in the garden Leona had created. It was a small ceremony, just close friends, and Alice, who served as the flower girl in a white dress and her signature pigtails. Dr. Donnelly came, smiling to see his patient looking so healthy. Jennifer was there with tears in her eyes. Leona wore a simple white dress, tea-length and elegant. Wesley wore a black suit. Alice carried a basket of tulip petals and took her job very seriously, carefully scattering them along the aisle. When Wesley and Leona exchanged vows, they wrote their own. "Leona," Wesley said, his voice thick with emotion. "6 years ago, you appeared at my door like an answer to a prayer I didn't know I was praying. You gave me Alice. You gave me purpose. You gave me love. I promised to stand by you through every storm. I promised to be your strength when you need it and to accept your strength when I need it. I promised to love you and Alice with everything I am, for all the days of my life." "Wesley," Leona said, her own voice breaking. "You took us in when we had nowhere else to go. You loved Alice unconditionally from the moment you met her. You stayed with me through the darkest times and never wavered. You showed me what it means to be truly loved. I promise to fight for this life we're building. I promise to be the best wife and mother I can be. I promise to make every day count, to live fully and love deeply, for as long as I have." When they kissed, Alice clapped so loudly that everyone laughed through their tears. Wesley and Leona turned to their daughter and she ran to them. They knelt down together and hugged her, the three of them forming a circle. A family. The summer was beautiful. Leona continued to improve. Her scans came back clear in June, then July. The doctors began to use the word remission cautiously. Wesley dared to hope that they had really beaten it, that they would have years together, not just months. They took Alice to the zoo, to museums, to the mountains. They had picnics in the park and movie nights at home. They were building a life, accumulating memories. Wesley taught Alice to ride her bike without training wheels. Leona taught her to plant flowers. They were a family in every sense of the word. And then, one evening in late August, Leona told Wesley she had a surprise for him. They were sitting on the porch, watching Alice play in the yard. The setting sun painted everything gold. "I went to the doctor today," Leona said. "Just a routine checkup." Wesley's heart clenched with fear. "Is everything okay?" Leona smiled, and it was the biggest smile he had seen on her face in a year. "More than okay. Wesley, I'm pregnant." Wesley stared at her, his mind struggling to process the words. "Pregnant? But how? I thought the cancer treatment would. The doctor said you probably couldn't." "Apparently I'm full of surprises," Leona said, laughing and crying at the same time. "It's early, only about 8 weeks. But it's real. We're going to have another baby." Wesley pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy and fear. Another baby. Another life. But also, what would this mean for Leona's health, for her recovery? "The doctors say it's okay," Leona said, reading his mind. "It's actually a good sign. It means my body is healthy enough, strong enough. They'll monitor me closely, but they're not worried." "Wesley, this is good news. This is wonderful news." "We're having a baby," Wesley whispered in wonder. He put his hand on her still flat stomach. "Another child." "What should we tell Alice?" Leona asked. As if on cue, Alice ran up to the porch. "What are you guys talking about?" Wesley and Leona looked at each other, then at their daughter. "Alice," Leona said gently, "how would you feel about being a big sister?" Alice's eyes went wide. "Really? I'm going to have a brother or sister?" "Really," Wesley confirmed. Alice shrieked with joy and threw herself at them, nearly knocking them over. "This is the best day ever. Can I help pick out the name? Can we paint the nursery? When is the baby coming?" Wesley laughed, his heart so full he thought it might burst. This was his life now. This beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. With a wife he adored and a daughter who made every day brighter and another baby on the way. 6 years ago, he had been a hollow shell of a man, going through the motions, waiting to die. And now he was more alive than he had ever been. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Leona continued to feel well, her energy actually improving. Alice was beside herself with excitement, constantly talking to her mother's growing belly, telling the baby about all the things they would do together. She insisted on helping paint the nursery, carefully wielding a small roller while Wesley did the actual work. "If it's a boy, we should name him Samuel," Alice declared one day. "It means God has heard in Hebrew. We learned that in Sunday school." "Samuel," Wesley said, trying out the name. "Samuel Kroeger, I like it." "And if it's a girl, we can name her Bethany," Alice continued. "After your first wife, Daddy, so she can still be part of our family." Wesley looked at Leona, tears in his eyes. Leona took his hand and nodded. "I think that's beautiful, Alice." The ultrasound in November revealed they were having a boy. Samuel. Alice danced around the doctor's office, chanting, "Samuel, Samuel, Samuel," until the nurses were laughing. Wesley held Leona's hand and watched the tiny form on the screen. This new life, this miracle. December came again, and with it, Leona's first clear anniversary. 1 year cancer-free. Dr. Donnelly declared her officially in remission, though he cautioned they needed to stay vigilant. But for now, she was healthy. She was strong. She was going to be okay. Christmas was even better than the year before. The house was full of laughter and music. Alice performed a concert on the piano Wesley had bought her, a halting but enthusiastic rendition of Jingle Bells. They baked cookies and watched movies and built snowmen, though this time Leona could participate fully, rolling snowballs and laughing as Alice peppered her with snowballs. And through it all, Leona's belly grew, a visible sign of the new life they were bringing into the world. Wesley found himself talking to his unborn son, telling him about his big sister and his mother and all the things they would do together. Labor came on a bright July morning. Leona woke Wesley at dawn, gripping his hand. "It's time." Wesley sprang into action, years of preparing for this moment clicking into place. He got Alice up, called Jennifer to come stay with her, grabbed the hospital bag they'd had packed for weeks. By the time they got to the hospital, Leona's contractions were coming fast. "I'm scared," Leona admitted as they wheeled her to the delivery room. "Don't be," Wesley said, holding her hand. "You've faced down so much worse than this. You're the strongest person I know. You can do this." Labor was long. 14 hours of pain and fear and hope. Wesley stayed by Leona's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, breathing with her. He had missed this with Alice, missed seeing her come into the world, and he was determined not to miss a second of Samuel's arrival. And then, finally, with one last push, Samuel Kroeger entered the world. His cry was loud and indignant, and Wesley had never heard a more beautiful sound. The nurse placed him on Leona's chest, and both of them cried as they looked at their son. He was perfect, tiny and red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would surely be blue. He had Wesley's nose and Leona's mouth and a cry that could wake the dead. "He's here," Leona sobbed. "He's really here." "You did it," Wesley said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You're incredible. I love you so much." Later, when Leona was cleaned up and settled in a room, Jennifer brought Alice to meet her brother. Alice approached the hospital bed cautiously, her eyes wide. "This is Samuel," Leona said, carefully placing the baby in Alice's arms. "Your little brother." Alice looked down at the baby in her arms, and her face transformed with wonder. "Hi, Samuel," she whispered. "I'm your big sister. I'm going to take care of you forever." Wesley stood back and watched his family, Leona in the hospital bed, tired but radiant. Alice holding her baby brother with the careful reverence of someone holding something precious beyond measure. And Samuel, tiny and new and perfect. This was his family. His real, complete, beautiful family. They had started with a one-night stand during a storm. They had survived secrets and cancer and fear and loss. They had fought for every moment of happiness. And now, here they were, together, whole. Wesley took a picture on his phone, Leona and Alice and Samuel, and then he got in the bed beside them, careful not to jostle anyone, and they all leaned together. A family portrait, a family that had been broken and lost and had found their way back to each other. "I love you," Wesley said to all of them. "I love you so much." "We love you too, Daddy," Alice said. Leona looked at him over Alice's head and mouthed, "Forever." And Wesley believed it. They had forever now, or at least they had today, and tomorrow, and the day after that. They had time to watch Samuel grow, time to see Alice become a young woman, time to grow old together, to build more memories, to love each other through whatever storms might come. Outside the hospital window, the sun was setting over Denver, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The storm that brought them together was long past, but the life they had built, the family they had created, that would last forever, that was their legacy. That was their story. This was their daughter. This was their son. This was their family, and this finally was their happy ending. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.